Part 1.
Ren breathed heavily, his feet and shins screaming with deep bruises and cuts from the relentless shrubs and thorns. He had been running for what felt like a quarter of an hour away from the slavers. His heart raced and he moved forward, trudging along the broken ground, crouching low with his back hunched. He kept his head and eyes below the shrub line, unable to see if they had turned back, silently hoping they couldn't hear him. Each footfall seemed noisy, yet he knew that certain sounds didn't carry far. Unlike the snapping of dry twigs, the ground beneath him wetly crunched with roots, rocks, and damp, rotting foliage. He carried a stone-napped axe, a thrusting spear, and an atlatl, all of which had survived the rain and the rough handling of his escape. His attire was a worn, patched flax linen tunic found in a burned-down village. Linen cloth, scavenged and repurposed as a hood, sleeves, and leggings, shielded him when he dove into the brush for cover. His belongings included a repaired drawstring bag, a wallet hidden under his shirt and around his neck, and 2 mismatched pouches at his waist. He also had wooden and copper flasks, each containing a litre of water, but no metal tools or weapons could be scavenged from the village. Half an hour later, Ren dared to look back, his mind a whirl of dread and paranoia. Thrust into this hostile world over a month ago, he clung to the hope that his skills from war games might save him. His attention sharpened when he spotted a slaver standing foolishly erect by a tree, mistaking it for concealment. The slaver's gaze swept over Ren's area, his body relaxed, showing no sign of recognition. Memories flooded back of Ren's arrival in this world, with others, only to fall into the hands of slavers. The slavers, captivated by the women's beauty, ignored him amidst the chaos, darkness, and rain. Brave men were swiftly subdued. Ren could only watch as the captors bickered over their human spoils. The memory of that night, fraught with fear, weakness, and confusion, haunted him. It was particularly disorienting because he remembered being engulfed by the bright light with his friends, only to find himself stranded among strangers in this new world. It felt miraculous that Ren had survived. He realized he shouldn't have been able to run with such endurance or at the frantic pace he had managed. His discovery came when he encountered puddles and running streams. His body was entirely different. He appeared elfin, feeling the strange pointed tips of his ears with his fingers. His vision was markedly improved, allowing him to see far better than ever before. The shock was intense as he observed and recognized details sharply. The faces of the slavers, the features of the deceased. He couldn't recall his past clearly, but surmised this must be akin to his youth's vitality when he could run and fight with boundless energy. The clarity within him stirred, guiding his movements as in his days of live-action role-playing and wargaming with friends. He possessed the speed and decisiveness of youth unmarred by the toll of age. Fatigue vanished as he navigated the underestimated sheer cliff face, reading the slavers' movements and sensing their growing frustration. Fearing a fatal fall, he spared only a cursory glance at the precipitous incline before pressing close against it, closing his eyes and listening intently, hoping to discern the slavers' retreat. After an hour of silence, he deduced their reluctance to pursue him down the hazardous slope. Ren then ascended, his past bow and climbing training awakening his upper body strength, allowing him to reach up to each handhold with determined pulls. In moments, he scaled the cliff and observed the slaver squad, now weary and retreating. He noted their sinewy frames, the bruises and cuts marking their limbs. The wind carried their scent to him, mingled with the impending rain, placing him advantageously downwind. His enhanced vision allowed him to scrutinize their faces and postures, identifying limps and signs of fatigue. Among the 4, he spotted the straggler, assessing their vulnerabilities. As the sound of approaching rain filled the air, Ren sensed the impending downpour. He swiftly navigated around, the dark, rain-heavy clouds enveloping the scene. Driven by the urgency, he dashed towards the slavers, aiming for a large tree nearby, strategically positioning himself. The rain turned the forest into a cacophony of sound, making the ground treacherous and muddy. Despite their caution, the slavers' aches led to slips and falls. Seizing the moment, Ren descended upon the most fatigued slaver who had fallen to his knees, driving his spear down into the man's collarbone from above. The victim was rendered speechless, unable to draw breath as the stone spear lodged firmly. As Ren contemplated retrieving his axe, he noticed the dying slaver's short falchion and buckler. He quickly appropriated these weapons and advanced on the next foe, who had turned in shock towards his fallen comrade. Ren hurled the buckler at the slaver's face, causing a cry that alerted the others. In a swift, brutal motion, he slashed the slaver's knee and shin, following through with a body tackle that sent the man tumbling to the ground. The two remaining slavers turned, one brandishing a sturdy iron spear, the other hesitating with a bow. As the spearman lunged, Ren's youthful body reacted instinctively, his enhanced vision capturing the prelude to the slaver's thrust. Ren felt a flashback to sparring with eager, albeit untrained youths, as he intercepted the spear with his falchion, aiming to sever its wooden shaft. The impact sent a numbing shock through Ren's arm, yet the blade bit deeply, disarming the slaver. In one fluid motion, Ren closed in, his arm hooking the slaver's shoulder, his foot slipping between the man's legs. Drawing from his extensive judo and jiu-jitsu training, Ren executed a precise hip throw, propelling the slaver directly into the path of the bowman. The unexpected collision forced the bowman to falter, just long enough for Ren to maneuver around the spearman and destabilize the bowman, who, struggling on the slippery terrain, misfired his arrow. Ren, seizing the moment, reached for the nearest weapon, an arrow from the bowman's spilled quiver. With a swift motion, he drove it into the bowman's chest, finding a gap above the pectoral and forcing it between the ribs. He twisted the arrow, pushing deeper, aiming to compromise the archer's thoracic integrity and induce a fatal collapse of the lungs. Ren's assault left the bowman gasping for air. Rolling off him, Ren's hands scrambled, seizing a stone as he propelled himself into a sprint towards the spearman. A wave of desperate violence surged through him. He clipped the spearman who was struggling to rise, sending them both crashing onto the rocky ground. Pain shot through Ren's hand as it met sharp rocks, but he didn't pause, rolling atop the spearman to pummel his face with the stone, targeting the forehead and jaw with ruthless efficiency. Mid-assault, Ren's enhanced peripheral vision caught a shadowy movement, the crippled slaver wielding an axe. The slight prelude to the slaver's swing gave Ren just enough time to hurl the stone, striking the attacker's face with a bone-crunching impact that sent teeth scattering. Detached, Ren observed the chaos he wrought, his heightened senses dissecting every detail, every shadow. This sensory overload triggered a flood of memories and thoughts, yet Ren remained focused. Rising to confront the axe wielder, he slashed upwards at the axe slaver's face, then turned his blade, moving in a downward arc towards the spearman in a smooth, clean motion. His forceful strike lodged the weapon deep due to imprecise edge alignment, failing to deliver a clean cut. Ren seized the spear, still embedded with his falchion, and thrust it into the bowman attempting to escape, his equipment abandoned in panic. As the rain intensified, soaking everything, Ren felt his heart pounding, adrenaline fueling his actions. He scavenged the battlefield, collecting weapons, the fractured spear, and swapping for better shoes and pouches. His acute senses navigated the muddy chaos, swiftly locating valuable items. With the storm masking his movements, Ren assessed the wind and rain patterns, intuitively choosing paths where erosion would better conceal his tracks. He vanished into the storm-swollen landscape, leaving the scene of fierce confrontation behind. Hours passed as he continued to run. His fingers and limbs wrinkled. Ren found a dry spot to rest under a rocky outcropping shaded by large trees. Erosion had carved out a nook where only rocks and soil remained. He washed his wounds with the stream of rainwater created by the tree, striving to remove the grit embedded in his feet, elbows, and hands. The terrain grew more treacherous, and he hoped the slavers were ill-equipped to track him to this refuge. Unwittingly, he dozed off, awakening to the warmth of a new day, surprised to find no signs of infection despite the numerous wounds and the strain on his immune system. Experiencing fatigue without illness was a novelty for him. The clarity of his senses only fully dawned on him as the desperation and frustration of constant flight ignited a desire to confront his pursuers. Bloodlust sharpened his perception, making every detail starkly visible. He could see viable routes up a tree and scan for followers. Before he knew it, He was perched in the tree, surveying the terrain he had traversed, perhaps more than 10 kilometers away, discerning subtle movements and the occasional glint of metal. The urge to engage, to test his limits in combat as he had never before, unlocked latent abilities he struggled to comprehend. A mantra in an unfamiliar language filled his mind, and he whispered it, attempting to extend his vision further. The chant ceased abruptly when he recognized the pangs of hunger and exhaustion. His gaze landed on wild fowl and rabbits, hinting at a shift in priorities. Ren realized that survival in this strange world entailed more than just evasion. It demanded adaptation and confrontation. Part 2. The salt enhanced every flavor. Ren opportunistically gathered familiar herbs reminiscent of basil, oregano, thyme, and long peppers, blending them into the tiny wooden flask he had acquired from the slaver. He found edible roots, their smells and appearances triggering his appetite. Occasionally, he encountered odd clusters of 3 or 4 plants that didn't seem naturally placed, including a type of edible stalk, a fruity vine, and clusters of edible seeds. Ren would thoughtfully rearrange the leftover seeds in areas he believed conducive to their growth in the forest. Within a few days, he repaired the bow, a fine self-bow with an unusual pattern in the wood grain and a thick handle nearly as robust as a staff when straightened. He unstrung it and dried it in a smokeless fire pit. Next, he sharpened the falchion and hammered out the nicks in the blade to achieve a smooth edge. He then remade his short stone spear, replacing its head with the iron spear, resulting in a weapon as tall as he was, rather than its original length, which was 3 hands taller than Ren. He replaced his stone axe with the metal one, featuring a small axe blade the size of his hand affixed to a heavy haft adorned with patina-covered copper rings and bands. Upon returning to the slavers' camp, Ren slowly deciphered their movements. His newfound bloodlust unveiled a different perspective, making him aware of previously overlooked clues, such as the definitive arrangement of seats and positions in the camp, more telling than mere step counting. He observed the impressions of beds and the locations where the slaves relieved themselves, noting the slavers' negligence in allowing the slaves to sleep near their waist. He pondered whether this indicated a decline in discipline and morale, and whether it would lead to the slaves being positioned further from the camp, or if the slavers would exert the effort to guard them and establish proper latrines. Disturbingly, he detected the presence of blood mixed with semen, his sharpened senses picking up on the grim details. He could track them, a skill honed by observing the shadows and deducing the time of day to infer cardinal directions. Ren distinguished the smells, separating the animal, filth, rot, and mold of the forest from the human scent and his own. Closing his eyes, his mind visualized the terrain's flow, the wind, and the weather patterns. He appreciated, in a way that only age could afford, how the stormy weather would aid his pursuit. Their onagers and pack goats would struggle with the uncertain footing as they moved northwest. A thought nagged at him. Why was he overwhelmed by the notion of human waste and disease emanating from that direction? Was there a city or imperial capital nearby, a place where slaves turned into coin? They hadn't bothered to retrieve the moulding and wet leather cuirass of their fallen comrades. Ren pondered the psychology of his quarry, now that he had experienced killing them. His thoughts often returned to his edge alignment, frustrated by his inability to cut cleanly. He practiced his swings whenever possible, recalling stick fighting where edge control didn't matter, and old fencing concepts that taught him about center and lines, tensing and then relaxing his muscles, itching to strike a small sapling. He resisted the urge to leave a trail, needing to adapt to his new, lighter and stronger body's perceptions. The hand axe, throwable and now secured behind his waist, had a makeshift cover made from leftover boiled leather to prevent accidental injury. Practicing with the biostaff was impossible as he neared the slavers. It took only 3 days to catch up, moving swiftly and hunting en route. He secured the biostaff and arrows to his largest drawstring bag, lamenting the lack of time to snipe with the bow. Such an attack required more preparation and practice. His arsenal of spear, axe, falchion, and buckler would suffice, especially after figuring out how to sling the buckler on his left shoulder for 2-handed spear use. The ambidexterity of his new body fascinated him. He could easily switch the axe haft to his left hand and the falchion to his right, storing the falchion at his waist while moving through the brush. The spear, however, was cumbersome, constantly occupying his hands and risking leaving marks unless he carefully rested it on a tree or rock. As Ren neared the slavers, their scent grew distinct from the last 2 cold camps. He detected illness among them. 3 slavers were sick, and some showed signs of dysentery. Noticing one slave's tracks had vanished without finding a body, he surmised the individual was still too valuable and likely carried by an overburdened pack goat. Observing discarded items like clay and wooden flasks and leaf packings, he realized they deemed these utensils unworthy of saving. Ren wondered, do they think I'm hunting them, or are their relationships so transactional that they don't care if the others die? Ren pondered the circumstances of their capture. How had the slavers found them? Why were they there? And what was their purpose in taking us? Were they expecting us those months ago? The details were hazy. Whatever had transpired, it was unexpected for the slavers. They lingered, searching for something. He questioned the logic of spending 2 months on a mission just for slaves like him, with distinct elfin features. Were they deemed valuable enough to warrant such an expenditure? And why were the men considered less valuable than the women? These idle thoughts were interrupted as night descended, and Ren began to eat salt-cured dried rodent meat, flattened into improvised jerky. He sensed their presence, deducing it from the sounds of insects and the pungent smell of human waste as the slavers took their evening break. Ren detected the aroma of their fires and noted the eerie silence of insects downwind from the smoke. Positioned north of their camp with the wind blowing from the south, he observed their need for light, their cook fires casting a revealing glow. He observed the slavers taking turns on one of the slaves, venting their frustrations. The commander had seemingly abandoned any pretense of discipline, indulging in the service of a slave. Ren's eyes caught sight of her, a figure of defeat and resilience, her beauty marred by bruises, her intense grey eyes capturing the moonlight, reflecting a deep heartbreak. From his vantage point in the tree canopy, nearly half a minute's run away, he watched. He wondered if, in her despair, she could sense his presence as he observed another ill slave being removed from the pack goats and shackled in iron chains alongside the others. Counting the enemy, Ren noted 20 slavers, 3 clad in leather cuirass, and 1 donning a sleeveless mail shirt with leather pauldrons. There were 8 slaves in total. Previously, he remembered, there had been more, with slavers outnumbering them 2-fold. His mind flashed back to their bindings and the sigils glowing in the darkness upon his arrival in this world. The buckler, bowstaff, larger satchel and quiver would be cumbersome in the impending confrontation. He watched the leader converse with the enslaved woman, wishing he could discern their words, yet knowing his priority was to identify a vulnerability. His heart twisted with disgust and pity at the sight of their mistreatment, particularly when the woman, attempting to console the other slaves with a gentle touch, was violently reprimanded. The slavers appeared to derive some perverse satisfaction from her compelled interactions. One, armoured, took a wooden rod and struck her on the thighs. While her bruises were not visible, her agonizing cries pierced the night. Edging closer, Ren could finally grasp their conversation. Astonishingly, he understood their language. The commander's harsh discipline continued as he demanded she use her healing abilities for his men, berating her for wasting her powers on the slaves. Through her tears, she pleaded, "We are more valuable unbroken." The commander's laugh echoed cruelly as he retorted, "You're right, but still heal my men, or teach one of the bitches to use their blood magic to heal them. There should be enough seed in them to heal twice as much." As Ren observed the brutal abuse of the women, the terror and helplessness that had initially overwhelmed him upon arrival, and the subsequent rage of seeing the men slaughtered, merged into a formidable tide of hate and anger. The sight of an elfin woman enduring her agony with a heart-wrenching cry crystallized his fear into something dark, terrifying, and furious with bloodlust. His heart pounded fiercely, and his breathing deepened, as if he were sprinting at full speed. Yet he remained still, every sensory detail magnified. The night seemed to brighten, the moon and stars overly vivid, and every detail around him became excruciatingly clear, making the slaver's movements appear painstakingly slow. With stealth born of this heightened awareness, Ren noted each silent step he took on the uneven ground, the surrounding darkness illuminated by the intense campfires, draining the world of colour. Having abandoned his pack and now without his spear and axe, he advanced, seizing a long knife from a nearby slaver. In a desaturated world, he moved with lethal precision, his spear slashing through the neck of one slaver, then retracting to deliver a deep, fatal cut to another who had been deceived by the presence of his comrade. Alerted by the cries of the wounded pack animals, the slaver's attention was drawn away, allowing Ren, already circling to their flank, to remain unseen. The men, their night vision compromised by their own torches, were blind to his approach. Ren capitalized on this advantage, his superior night vision enabling him to navigate the shadowed terrain with ease. He launched his axe, striking a guard on the flank, the weapon embedding deep into bone. Swiftly drawing the stolen long knife, Ren executed a series of rapid strikes, aiming to collapse lungs and silence cries, moving through the shadows like a wraith. Amid the flickering chaos of the firelight, Ren danced through the ranks of the slavers, his exceptional night vision dissecting the battlefield. He exploited the blind sides of the regular humans, their eyes ruined by the bright torches and fires. He targeted their legs, shins and knees, then charged through the camp, evading predictable low swings and leaping over them with a flip, slashing at eyes and faces mid-air. Landing, he felt the earth buckle under him, yet remained agile, swiftly cutting down the next line of slavers. His falcon cleaved through hamstrings and calves, predicting their movements, and as they recoiled in pain, Ren struck decisively at their necks. The knife, although missing its intended mark, gouged deeply into a shoulder, while his falcon, more familiar in his grasp, opened a lethal wound on the side of another neck. Amidst the turmoil, a slave seized a moment of defiance, snapping her head back to shatter the teeth of the slaver behind her. Turning to face her assailant, she found his front teeth missing, likely embedded in her skull, and in a surge of desperation born from enduring months of abuse, she wrapped her chained hands around his neck and sank her teeth into his carotid artery. The ensuing chaos spurred the other slaves into action, fighting back fiercely. However, 2 of them fell under the slaver's brutal counterattack. One's face was crushed with a hammer, another stabbed as they attempted to rise and scream. Ren's breathing deepened, drawing in the acrid mix of smoke, blood, and filth permeating the camp. Deciding it was time to end this, he dashed towards the source of a commanding voice, his powerful strides tearing through the earth, hurling clods of soil with each step. Within moments, he was bearing down on the commander, who had adopted a high overhead guard. The commander, confident in his reach and experience, swung his sword down in a swift arc, believing his skill superior to that of the perceived escaped slave. However, Ren had anticipated this very move, observing the shadow of the descending blade, poised to cleave his skull. Ren had baited the commander into overconfidence, hurling his long knife and falcon directly at the commander's face. The experienced leader managed a barely sufficient parry of the knife, then, in a desperate move, redirected his entire momentum to block the falcon. Exploiting this, Ren launched his foot forward, meeting the commander's face while flipping upside down, his entire weight enforcing a scissor lock around the man's head. This unexpected assault knocked the larger commander backward, allowing Ren to seize and wrench one of his arms, using his aerial momentum to disrupt the commander's balance and control. Locked in a scissor grip, Ren tightened his legs around the commander's neck, applying a deadly choke while using his arms and body torque to fracture the other arm. As the commander, overwhelmed, dropped his sword to support his faltering neck, time seemed to slow for Ren. Amidst his rage, a part of him coldly calculated, observing the commander's struggle, applying precise leverage to snap the bone. With the commander unable to guard his neck, Ren executed a swift, torso-driven movement, amplifying his leg's force to fatally twist the commander's neck. Seizing the sword and long knife, Ren executed a feint with the sword, skillfully tossing it to the nearby slave while simultaneously dodging a riposte from an attacking slaver. He exploited the opening as the slaver's cuirass lifted during a high guard maneuver, plunging the knife into the exposed waist area. The woman barely caught the sword, her initial shock giving way to a grim realization. As another slaver launched an attack at her, Ren relentlessly stabbed him in the kidneys, ensuring both incapacitation and excruciating pain. The slave, wielding her new weapon, struck the guard's face with unrefined, yet effective force, resulting in a gruesome wound. As Ren's perception of time normalized, he took in the full extent of the woman's suffering, her bruises, her haunting grey eyes. In this moment of clarity, he noted that 10 guards were still combat-ready, albeit disorganized. With several forceful swings of a spatha, he decapitated the commander, raising the severed head to challenge the remaining slavers. "Do you still have fight in you?" Their resolve faltered, and in their desperation, they attempted to take hostages. Ren, with precise aim, hurled the spatha at a slaver adjacent to a hostage-taker, ensuring the woman remained unharmed. The sight of the sword embedded in his comrade's face distracted another slaver long enough for a woman to bludgeon him to death with a hammer. Ren, his voice strained, announced, "Now there's 8. Fear and the reality of their plight set in, prompting some to flee while others collapsed from their injuries. In this chaos, Ren, conserving his strength, allowed the women to exact the vengeance they had long been denied. Part 3. Ren struggled to pronounce her name, Irelia, who gazed at him with a look of an entwined history. Her recognition became apparent when she addressed him, "Kalin, Sunspouse, is that you?" His response, tinged with confusion, was, "Sorry, do I know you?" The realization dawned on Ren that this body and its memories were not solely his, and this woman had played a significant role in his counterpart's life. Her graceful acceptance of his confusion pained him, as her smile didn't extend past her lips. "May I know your name, sir?" she inquired, resigned yet composed. "I remember being called Ren. Who are you?" he asked. As they reintroduced themselves, Irelia revealed their past as former spouses, separated nearly 20 winters ago, their progeny now establishing their own families. Alongside Irelia were Theria and Dashiel. Theria, slighter in stature, bore the marks of fatigue and pain, yet retained an undeniable beauty reminiscent of models or actresses from Ren's past, aged ambiguously in their 20s or 30s. Dashiel, while not as striking as the others, had a youthful resilience etched in her features, distinguished by intense brows, dark lips, and a narrow chin. The other two, more human in appearance yet still striking, were Sane and Thine. They were shorter, reaching only to Ren's collar, with long curly hair and vivid round eyes. Sane's hair a reddish-brown, Thine's jet black. Their features, rounder and less angular, contrasted with the elfin elegance of the others, set against their darker, sun-kissed skin. Ren, whose mind was usually scattered in the presence of attractive women, found an unsettling clarity now. This lucidity rendered him detached, save for an inexplicable draw to Irelia. His former awkwardness and obsessive pedantry were absent, replaced by a quiet, attentive demeanour. Engaging naturally, he noticed Sane and Thine's reactions brighten, their pupils dilating with interest as he focused on their words. The intrusive thoughts that once besieged him were now absent, replaced by a serene concentration and self-assuredness. Observing Irelia and Theria, Ren discerned subtle nuances in their aura, gleaning meanings from their sparse words. Dashiel, slightly less refined, hinted at her half-elf heritage through subtle subordination to the elfin women, a detail Ren noted passively, recalling only when necessary, as evident as distinguishing a tree by the shadows of its leaves. Sane and Thine exhibited profound reverence towards the other 3 women, a sentiment amplified by the care and recovery magic they received. They learned survival and healing under the tutelage of their more experienced counterparts. To Ren, Irelia and Theria exuded the charisma of actresses, yet in matters of camp logistics, its care, protection and security, they commanded with authority, orchestrating the tasks and strategies needed. Ren found himself acting instinctively on cues from Irelia, puzzled by his own responses, yet her fleeting smiles in his peripheral vision suggested a shared past, rekindling briefly in their cooperative glances. Thyria and Dashiell were more direct with their needs, requiring explicit communication with Ren, who proactively sought to understand their requirements. In contrast, Sane and Thine's needs were more nuanced, demanding attentive inference from Ren to affirm the value of their contributions. Ren took on the role of scout and provider, securing game, water, and materials for self-bows and arrows, while also ensuring the camp's safety from predatory animals. Irelia and Thyria, leveraging their experience, guided the group in essential survival skills, from setting up camp to self-defense techniques. Ren came to realize that the scissor lock move, pivotal in his combat success, was a technique he had learned from Irelia, a relic of their shared past. Efficiently, Ren repurposed the captured male into vests for 3 of the women, while adjusting boiled leather cuirasses to fit the others. Thyria, regaining her strength through blood magic, necessitated an increased calorie intake for the group. They discreetly altered their elven features to blend more with humans, sacrificing some heightened abilities for anonymity. Their martial training intensified, with Sane and Thine assimilating blood magic to maintain their ability to keep with the others, their efforts visibly depleting their physical reserves. Their journey led them northwestward towards Asteros, driven by Irelia and Thyria's need to uncover the slavers' knowledge of their village and the summoning ritual. Dashiell, Sane, and Thine, though initially hesitant, were galvanized by the resolve of the elfin women. Amidst the underlying fear and trauma of the ordeal, the group was aware of the slim odds of traversing back 2,000 kilometers to their origin. Irelia, concerned for her grandchildren's safety from potential slaver raids, prioritized their security and education. Thyria, fueled by a desire for vengeance, gathered toxic flora for her burgeoning arsenal, while Irelia concentrated on nurturing the skills and knowledge of the younger women. The transition from wilderness to civilization was marked by the gradual thinning of the dense woods into managed woodlots and copses, signifying human cultivation. The sparse, deliberate arrangement of the trees gave way to a broad stone road, approximately 5 to 6 carriages wide by Ren's estimation. Their group, cloaked in heavy garments and makeshift armor, resembled a band of armed militia, with the women disguising their forms to appear more like men. As they progressed, the signs of civilization intensified, fires flickered in the distance, and the mingled scents of smoke, cooking, and urban life grew stronger. Before them stretched a formidable wall, towering 10 meters high and 5 meters thick, dominating the horizon. The skyline was punctuated with the slender forms of minarets and temple spires, alongside residential spires adorned with bells and lamps, casting a welcoming glow. The ambient sounds of prayers, bells, and gongs mingled with the bustle of travellers, creating a lively cacophony typical of a city's heartbeat. Approaching the southern gate, they were greeted by the imposing figure of a patron deity sculpted above the entrance, an ox-man with sprawling horns akin to those of a guar or aurochs, merged with the lower face and hands of a man, large enough to encircle 3 or 4 adults. Ren's tactical eye quickly assessed the city's defences, kill holes strategically positioned along the wall-housed archers, their bows strung with iron-tipped arrows at the ready. Observing the flutter of armour in the breeze, Ren discerned it to be primarily boiled leather, tinged with discoloration where metal lamellae were integrated for enhanced protection in vital areas. Asteros presented an unexpectedly pristine appearance, its streets paved with stone, indicating the city's affluence. Ren deduced that the substantial stonework hinted at a prosperous urban core, eager to witness its scope. He noticed the self-mending qualities of the pavement, where cracks seemed to have seamlessly closed, speckled with quicklime, evidence of a Roman concrete-like material in use. The streets, designed with a subtle incline, directed rainwater towards efficiently engineered drains, where work gangs were actively removing accumulated sludge. Beside them, neatly arranged, were stone and ceramic perforated tiles, ready for road maintenance. The city's aroma was surprisingly fresh, more akin to contemporary metropolises than the medieval city-state Ren had envisioned. Beyond the broad main roads, residential buildings lined the thoroughfares, interrupted by narrower alleys at regular intervals. Architecturally, the streets were dominated by multi-storied structures rising to about 5 levels, supported by robust arches and columns that formed arcades. These covered walkways provided sheltered pathways, bustling with the activity of beasts of burden and carts. The area around the arcades buzzed with perpetual construction and renovation. Building materials were systematically arranged and secured, signifying ongoing repairs and enhancements. The auditory landscape was a blend of continuous carpentry and the clamour of street vendors weaving through the arcade, their calls melding with the city's soundscape. Open toilets integrated within certain side streets displayed a raw aspect of city life, where the daily routines of eating, drinking and socialising coexisted. Wren observed the perforated stone underfoot, indicating an elaborate network of canals beneath the streets linked to these public facilities. He noticed the strategic flow of water through these channels, moving steadily towards the south and west of the city. A notable establishment was a public bath, situated near inns, taverns and a travellers' guild, creating a hub of activity and services. Inquiring for lodging, Wren learned of a hospitia located in the city's western part, illustrating the structured and accessible amenities as Thoros offered to its inhabitants and visitors. The playful yet mischievous children attempting to pilfer their belongings offered a light-hearted diversion. Irelia, Thyria and Wren were quick to spot these youthful antics. While Irelia navigated the path ahead, Thyria mingled along the crowded edges, and Wren, ever watchful, trailed the group. The bustling crowd necessitated louder communication. Wren spoke in codes instinctively shared with Irelia and Thyria, while Dashiell translated for Sain and Thine, aiding their understanding. As they acclimated, they actively engaged in the discourse, with Wren elucidating the urban landscape, identifying thieves, slavers, and gangs scouting for victims. As they immersed themselves in the city's rhythm, the group, especially Dashiell, Sain, and Thine, adeptly modified their accents to blend in. Irelia and Thyria facilitated this linguistic adaptation, reinforcing the correct pronunciations and accents. The exploratory exchange of new words and their nuances enriched their understanding, with each member contributing insights into the locals' usage and intonation. Wren's acute vision, capable of discerning minute facial expressions and body language from afar, became an asset, though Sain and Thine needed blood magic to achieve similar perceptual clarity. This ability earned appreciative glances from the group, particularly from Irelia, whose subtle gestures of satisfaction stirred something in Wren. Their interaction with the locals, marked by genuine assistance and gratitude, further integrated them into the city's fabric. At the Travellers' Guild, Irelia prioritized gathering intelligence, where a reception desk offered structured assistance, a setup Wren amusingly found cliched yet functional. The group settled in, with Thyria facilitating the order of boiled water and tea, negotiating terms with a vendor paying her dues to operate within the guild's premises. The ordering system was intriguing. Small wooden cards, each bearing a symbol representing the menu items, were placed in a lockable device showcasing the top card. A distinctively coloured card could be inserted to modify or cancel the order, a detail Wren noted with interest. Thyria handled the transaction, providing change, as the group delved deeper into discussions about their surroundings. The timely arrival of their order paralleled the intensifying conversation, highlighting their integration into the city's dynamic environment. Wren meticulously dissected their forthcoming actions, teaching Sain, Thine, and occasionally Dashiell, who masked her curiosity, about his observations of the city's populace. He distinguished the various professions and gauged the economic strata, deepening his understanding of the girls' past by correlating these roles to their native village professions. He observed the city's wealth, reflected in the exorbitant costs of sustenance and accommodation, a challenge for the women to meet in terms of bronze and silver. Thyria returned to the group with hot water and a distinctive snack, cakes seared between iron plates, filled with sweet beet jam and coated in savoury lard. In a discreet gesture, she removed the herbs she had been masticating from her mouth, blending them into the tea. Wren, observing this action, recalled instances during their journey when Thyria would subtly spit into their beverages. The new context here was her spitting into boiled water, a process that intrigued Wren. considering the potential for residual flavors or sediments in the water. Wren's grasp of Theria's magic deepened with this observation. He realized her abilities in manipulating plant properties, neutralizing toxins, and purification didn't just involve external application, but required her to internally generate the necessary reagents or ingredients. This method, while perhaps unsettling to some, showcased Theria's adept control over microorganisms and her capacity to enhance or alter flavors and chemical compositions through her inherent magical processes. Theria's interjections in Wren's discourse not only clarified details but also led to enriching exchanges that elevated her status as a wise and enigmatic figure among the women. Even from a distance, Wren, alongside Theria and Dashiell, managed to grasp fragments of Aurelia's dealings with the clerk, including the discreet exchange of coins and the clerk's profuse apologies to other customers. The involvement of Sane and Thine in the conversation, drawn by Aurelia's strategic and charismatic interaction, instilled a sense of confidence and intrigue. Dashiell's interest in Aurelia prompted Theria's description of her as a diplomat, which Wren quickly nuanced with intelligence connotations. Theria amended her description to scout and agent, hinting at a shared history with her husband Colleen, her gaze fixed on Wren to emphasize the need for discretion. This revelation nearly made Wren choke on his too hot tea. His effort to swallow the scalding liquid painfully underscored his obliviousness regarding Aurelia, juxtaposing his intellectual acumen with a personal blind spot concerning his sundered spouse and her clandestine prowess. By the time Aurelia rejoined the group, they were already indulging in their third order of snacks. She seamlessly integrated into the gathering, beginning her meal with an air of nonchalance. Theria, maintaining the guise of casual conversation, subtly sought confirmation of the details discussed with the clerk. Aurelia, while focusing on her food, provided confirmations and clarifications, revealing she had secured an audience with the guild master and the possibility of obtaining endorsement letters, particularly for favors that might leverage their unique abilities. Wren, taken aback, noted Aurelia's use of seduction, especially her implied offer to assist the clerk and her partner with conception. This rare display of forwardness not only underscored the gravity of their situation, but also hinted at the necessity for such intimate persuasion to ensure their mission's success. However, the casual atmosphere was momentarily disrupted when Dashiell subtly averted her eyes, signaling an unseen threat. Wren adapted, tuning out the ambient noises to concentrate on the sounds filtering through a one-sided perforated barrier, enhancing his situational awareness. Aurelia and Theria, sensing the shift in Dashiell's demeanor, engaged Sane and Thine in light-hearted dialogue, a strategic move to soften their collective body language and dispel any suspicion of their alertness. This subtle dance of words and gestures underscored the group's adeptness in the nuanced art of spycraft, where every action, no matter how trivial, was a calculated step in their covert operations. Wren chastised himself for not sooner grasping the breadth of Aurelia's wisdom, which she patiently imparted through tales of their shared history and the lurking threats they faced. During their journey to Asteros, in the scant hours of rest at night, she unveiled the intricate world of blood magic and its practitioners. Wren learned of the matriarchs, priestesses, and witches, the matriarchs, who collaborated with nobility to refine talents and abilities, even altering embryos to sculpt flesh. The priestesses, who wielded magic for healing and affliction, capable of manipulating the body's fabric to heal, harm, or immobilize, and the witches, who exerted their influence over beings and nature, crafting potions and commanding thralls. Aurelia's insights into the world of warlocks and blood mages and their comparative lack of power next to the moon-empowered women captivated Wren. Despite his elven acuity, he felt a profound attraction to Aurelia, an allure that transcended mere physical appeal. His mind, woven with myriad threads of focus, allowed him to dissect his reactions and thoughts meticulously. He was drawn to her, ensnared not just by her physical beauty, but by her seductive intelligence and the way she seemed genuinely engrossed in his words. Unlike his past life, where his attractions often led to simplistic reactions, here he could perceive the layers of her allure, recognizing the calculated charm she wielded with effortless grace. This attraction, however, did not manifest in the usual distractions. Instead, it sharpened his attentiveness. Wren's interactions with Aurelia, and indeed the other women, were characterized by a keen charm and thoughtful engagement. His interest was genuine, driven by a desire to learn and understand, rather than any physical or emotional need. This detached yet intensely curious approach made him remarkably charming, his allure amplified by his self-control and analytical mind. Wren's realization of his own vulnerability to attraction, despite his intellectual detachment, added a layer of complexity to his character, showcasing a man who could be the epitome of self-control, yet candidly acknowledge the simple human folly of attraction. Aurelia's breadth of knowledge, as she disclosed, came not only from her own experiences and the final confessions of the dying, but also from the narratives of Western traders. Her ability to extract memories from those on the brink of death hinted at a darker aspect of her past, suggesting a willingness to end lives when necessary. This revelation should have alarmed Wren, yet his intrigue with Aurelia created a blind spot, his judgment clouded by an inexplicable draw to her. The information she shared with Wren was comprehensive enough to offer a clear framework for understanding, yet it was crafted to avoid overwhelming him, allowing his own judgment to navigate the complexities of their environment. Their conversations, though rich in information, were interspersed with moments of tension, where Aurelia momentarily seemed to anticipate a counter-argument, a habit stemming from her interactions with Colleen. This dynamic hinted at a historically fraught and intense relationship, where open, unfiltered exchange, although rooted in truth and mutual understanding, may have led to past conflicts and misunderstandings. This underlying strain, coupled with their deep connection, created a paradoxical interplay between familiarity and distance. Aurelia, facing a man reminiscent of her once-beloved husband yet devoid of their shared burdensome history, found herself in a quandary. The potential for a new beginning with Wren, a man echoing Colleen's essence but unmarred by previous transgressions, offered a tantalizing yet fearful prospect. This nuanced interplay of emotions and memories underscored their interactions, revealing a complex tapestry of love, regret, and the enduring search for truth within the shadow of their shared past. In the room they rented, they took meticulous measures to ensure a pest-free environment, burning herbs and lining their beds with spice deterrents before succumbing to sleep. The allure of the city's baths was strong, but the need to disguise their true identities and origins took precedence. Despite being nestled within the city's heart, the wilderness's silence was replaced by the incessant nocturnal activity of Asthoros, where the sounds of persistent labour pierced the night. Aurelia departed first, with Wren trailing discreetly 100 steps behind. She rendezvoused with Sana, the clerk, whose personal tales of loss after her third child added a sombre note to their nocturnal journey. Their passage through the city was a silent dance of shadows, navigating a labyrinthine route that belied the dangers of nighttime strolls in the sacred city. Sana's familiarity with the locale allowed them shortcuts through private properties. Her apologies met with understanding nods from the accommodating owners. Wren, unable to follow Aurelia's stealthy shortcuts, opted for the illuminated public streets. His journey was fraught with danger as he encountered gangs emboldened by the night's cover, testing their luck against the city's defences. Wren's acute senses picked up the distant clamour of conflict, the sound of a javelin thwarting a thief's efforts at forced entry. The activation of a nearby spire signalled the city watch's alertness, casting light on the immediate area. Navigating through the chaos, Wren deftly avoided the gangs now scattering in panic. His defence was swift and non-lethal, using the falchion's blunt end to incapacitate with broken fingers and wrists, a measured response that avoided life-altering harm. His actions, while forceful, were a testament to his control and strategic approach to confrontation within the bustling, perilous nightscape of Asteros. Wren discreetly followed Aurelia, finding a vantage point on an adjacent structure where he could observe without being noticed. From his perch, he overheard Aurelia engaging with Sana and her husband Timon, discussing the intricacies of blood magic and its potential to aid in conception and pregnancy. Timon detailed the guildmaster's availability and the bureaucratic process for their upcoming audience and documentation. The conversation shifted to the delicate topic of fertility assistance, with Aurelia confirming her capabilities in blood magic, leading the couple to believe she might be a blood mage or matriarch. The discussion took a personal turn as Timon expressed concerns about their difficulties in conceiving. Aurelia, with patience and expertise, outlined the blood magic procedure, explaining that it could enhance the viability of the pregnancy outside of Sanna's natural cycle. She described how the process would require a substantial contribution from Timon, as the magic involved would strengthen the developing embryo for a full-term pregnancy. The scene unfolded with a sense of ritual and reverence as Aurelia prepared to utilize her abilities to aid the couple. The night progressed through phases of rest and rejuvenation, punctuated by the sounds of a deeply personal and transformative process. From his concealed vantage point, Ren intently observed the events, his thoughts oscillating between the present and memories of his past life with Aurelia. He subconsciously bit his lip, a reaction to the intimate echoes of shared history and the realization of the proceedings below. As the hours unfolded, marked by the rhythmic cadence of life-creating efforts, Ren's reflections deepened. He acknowledged the extraordinary power of blood magic in shaping and creating life, paralleling the scientific processes akin to modern fertility medicine from his original world. The sounds emanating from the room, gentle murmurs, the rustle of fabric, and intermittent soft exclamations, acted as poignant reminders of his past experiences with Aurelia. They had once shared such moments immersed in magic and mutual vulnerability, weaving the fabric of life with their united intent. Ren realized that Aurelia was selecting the most viable embryo, a process reminiscent yet distinct from the practices of his original world, where excess embryos might be stored or discarded. Here, Aurelia employed her magic to reintegrate the unused material into the mother, enhancing her capacity to sustain the pregnancy and reducing the likelihood of complications. The ritual of blood magic was grounded in the physical realm, necessitating direct contact, with Aurelia's bodily fluids playing a crucial role in facilitating the physiological transformations required. This laborious night, filled with Aurelia's meticulous manipulations, revealed the depth of effort involved in such magical interventions. Ren pondered whether elfin conception typically demanded such a triadic collaboration, or if it was reserved for instances fraught with difficulty. The night's events offered a glimpse into the exhaustive and intricate nature of blood magic, its impact resonating deeply with Ren's understanding of their shared past and the complexities of life creation. As the night waned and they left the couple to their rest, Ren observed the toll the ritual had taken on Aurelia. "She would get sore, and I had to help him out. He is a very willing man and faithful husband," she remarked, her voice devoid of irony, aware of Ren's awareness of the bedroom activities. "Unfortunately, his health and diligence have made him not as robust as some men," she added, locking eyes with Ren, an unspoken acknowledgement between them. "You don't have to explain to me," Ren interjected softly. "You mentioned you were sun-spouses. Decades have passed, and you've had other partners. One of them died protecting you while I ran. Yet I feel the need to explain," she countered, brushing her hair from her face, her eyes lingering on his, just a tad too long for casual notice. "I'm not Kayleen. You shouldn't feel obligated to explain," Ren responded, his gaze unwavering, absorbing the intricate features of her face. "Yet I see some of his mannerisms in you, a stranger who doesn't know me," she mused, halting her advance, her lips barely moving in a silent confession that Ren easily deciphered. Her subtle flirtation seemed out of place to Ren, who, devoid of his former insecurities, could dissect the intent and hesitation behind her actions. Aurelia's gaze, intense and questioning, seemed to ponder aloud. "Why do you act like when we first met, as if you were Colleen?" This moment of vulnerability and reflection highlighted the intricacies of their relationship, bridging past and present, and revealing the deep undercurrents of connection and confusion between them. Meanwhile, at the hospitia, Dashiell, Sain, and Thine have formed an unexpected bond shaped by the shared trauma of witnessing slaughter and enduring loss. Ren, with his attentive and empathetic nature, made them feel valued, treating their words and experiences as significant. His demeanor was that of an ideal companion, focused on aspects of their lives that brought them comfort and ease. Theria and Irelia served as guiding figures, embodying the roles of mother, elder sister, and even father, offering wisdom and gentle discipline, reminiscent of the soothing presence of a nurturing parent during night terrors. Theria's incense offered more than just a fragrant ambience. It dulled the sharp edges of fear and memory, evoking a childlike vulnerability in the women as they sought solace in her presence. Theria reminisced about the days when her children, and later her grandchildren, would find comfort in her embrace, echoing the warmth and security Thiel once provided. Her musings on Thiel's love and protective nature highlighted a profound connection, one where the roles of comforter and comforted seamlessly intertwined, revealing the depth of familial bonds and the enduring nature of love. Theria, amidst the quiet of the night, carried the weight of her memories, particularly of Thiel, whose death was a vivid tapestry of courage and brutality. She witnessed his fierce battle, where it took an onslaught of adversaries to overwhelm him. Despite being outmatched, Thiel fought with a tenacity that was both awe-inspiring and heart-wrenching. Theria saw the desperation in his attackers as they struggled to subdue him, finally resorting to spears and savage blows to decapitate him. This gruesome end, while horrific, underscored the profound love and determination Thiel had for her, a memory that, although painful, shaped the indelible image of him in her heart. Thiel's hands, rugged and calloused from years of labour, constructing, gardening and smithing, were a testament to his life's work and his strength. Yet those same hands were capable of gentle caresses, intimate expressions of love and desire that transcended the passing of time. Their frequent moments of closeness were not merely acts of physical love, but reaffirmations of their deep, enduring bond. Even as they aged, their connection remained vibrant, fueled by mutual need and affection. Losing Thiel was not just a personal tragedy for Theria, but an existential void. His absence left a palpable emptiness, a silence where once there was the comforting presence of a partner who had been her other half. For Theria, an elf with a long span of years and a wealth of memories, Thiel's loss was not an event to move past, but a profound alteration of her being, a shift in the essence of her existence. His love and sacrifice were imprinted in her soul, a reminder of their shared journey and the unyielding strength of their bond. The poignant memories of Thiel stirred Theria in her sleep, causing tears to stream down her cheeks. Sain, awakened by the silent echoes of Theria's grief, observed the sorrow etched on her face, illuminated by the moonlight seeping through the window. This wasn't the first time she had witnessed such a display of pain. The night had often revealed the hidden depths of Theria's loss. Moved by the sight, San reached out, her actions tender and protective. She brushed away the tears with a soft kiss, a whisper of comfort in the heavy silence of the room. Wrapping her arms around Theria, Sain pulled her closer, offering a silent embrace that spoke volumes, a promise of shared strength and unspoken understanding in the quiet hours of the night. Thine's dreams, usually haunted by visions of her sister combating slavers, were less intense this night, though the echoes of conflict lingered. Sain's slumber took her through the unfamiliar streets of the new city, mingling with memories of her father and brothers. Her heart ached for her mother as she instinctively clung tighter to Theria. Dashiell experienced a jarring interruption in her dreams, reliving the moment her elfin father fell to the slaver's blades. The potency of Theria's magic seemed amplified within the confines of the room, offering a stronger buffer against the nightmares than the open wilderness had allowed. The sharpness of the past traumas, while not erased, began to dull, the immediacy of those horrific memories fading as time under Irelia's and Theria's nurturing guidance wove a tapestry of healing and stability, aiding the women in navigating their grief. When Irelia and Ren returned, they gently roused Dashiell to unbolt the door. They joined the sombre yet comforting huddle, with Irelia nestling close to Ren, enveloping him in a tender embrace. His weary senses barely registered the closeness, drifting between the realms of wakefulness and sleep, enveloped in the shared warmth of their gathered presence. Part 4. Violence is more complicated than problem-solving, Ren thought. It just created more problems as witnesses and collateral damage added to the work. It would have been easier just to eliminate the symptoms. The raiders and the pilferage suffered by the doge of the Traveller's Guild instead of going about a root cause. The training and agility in allocating resources and adapting to changing circumstances. The Traveller's Guild was confusing. It was the guild that focused on resupplying and equipping the inns, way stations, and messengers of Asteros. It's pretty much the information network of Asteros, or more specifically, its priest king, Tathos. Although it occurred to Ren, why doesn't the priest king handle information directly? This bothered him. Why have the eunuch steward Camber process all this information? Isn't he worried about being influenced by the data produced by his underlings and their machinations? Of course, this is a city-state, not a corporation or engineering group. It bothered Ren because it meant the organization focused more on perception than substance. Burning through surplus, and a bubble is about to burst. Travelers Guild members had special passports that gave access to lodging, way stations, and travel supplies. But in return, they required a lot of record-keeping and reports. Reports were read by Steward Camber's staff and summarized for the Priest King. All the other guilds paid a hefty tax for using the guild's facilities. The major drawback is the surplus and supplies Doge Alvert has to maintain. Enough supplies allow armies of 1,000 men to rush to borders 100 kilometers away. Doge Alvert maintains a large quantity of preserved food production and disposes of these foods in and around his inns, way stations, and lodgings. The farthest reach of the Travelers Guild is 1,000 kilometers southwest, where Prince Con is campaigning to capture territory. Doge Alvert gets to lease the captured lodging and way stations that Priest King Tathos gains. Ren had to bring his mind to the present, particularly watching Aurelia create a canary trap. He had to observe her and listen to people following her as she fed 5 different types of misinformation to test for the source of the leaks. The misinformation ranged from Doge Alvert's staff assigning jobs and resupplies based on their resupply points, the warehousing allocating the supplies, the teamsters in shipping and delivery, the custodians, to the quality control who verified the supplies. She was amazing to watch, spinning 5 different stories and 5 different ways to tell who acted on which information. When Timon made the introductions, they were quite skeptical of what Aurelia and Ren offered, but both had done their due diligence. Aurelia talked to everyone, learning what was going on by pretending to be various people making simple conversation. Meanwhile, Ren did something he used to do in his original world, auditing with the perfect memory of an elfin mind and the ability to infer and discover anything. Ren asked Aurelia first what she discovered, but she insisted he go first. Ren had to explain some key engineering and lean concepts for her to follow. Still, Ren had experience teaching many junior engineers these concepts and used plain, common-sense terms to help people follow along. This was better because it confirmed and narrowed her suspicions, as hearsay is more difficult to verify without hard evidence. When they presented to Doge Alvert, Aurelia presented all their findings. She could guess their symptoms and the specific problems in their records, and with a margin of 10% error, the deficit in supplies and backlog. She even recommended 6 changes in their record-keeping to cut their work down by 80%. Ren watched her, knowing she was really good at working a crowd and able to communicate very technical information, sounding like she was giving a military reconnaissance report. Explaining how this was going to be solved was more of Aurelia's expertise. Ren was surprised, even though she didn't think explaining all the technical aspects was within her abilities. She could gauge how much the audience could comprehend and when they reached their limit. Another amazing feat was that the improvement she suggested was able to bring in a lot of silver. Silver was for Theria's intelligence and for gathering and training the 3 juniors. Aurelia noticed how much Ren seemed to be like Colleen when it came to work. Colleen liked letting her shine and just enjoyed watching her work the audience. What was different about Ren was how much he wanted to spend more time practicing and preparing, while Colleen liked to test out his theories and explore without her. Colleen moved so fast that others tried to keep up, and she couldn't keep up, even if she tried to sound as smart and capable as he expected her to be. For the Doge's staff, the trap involved a reorder of valuables issued from the Doge's household outside the city, mixed in with a regular resupply. For the inventory, the trap was excess goods of value in the count, and an opportunity for those goods to be released during a poorly guarded shift. Teamsters were given destinations, only for these to be changed at the last minute. For the custodians in the stations, wrong deliveries were created. And lastly, they checked if the guild agents reported the discrepancies accurately. Using a messenger's Antelope and the Doge's agent named Jar, they covered all the way stations to check the effectiveness of the traps. Like any manual logistics system, many problems were discovered by Jar in this audit. Several thousand bronze worth of problems and almost 2 tons of supplies were mismanaged. Jar was getting sleepy from the conflicting records he was reading during the slow trot to the next way station when Ren and Aurelia spurred their Antelope faster. 10 bandits tried to ambush a more formidable number of Teamsters and their guards. When they arrived, the initial volley had killed the front Teamsters but failed to kill the rear Teamsters, bottling them down. The other Teamsters ran away when Aurelia and Ren went behind the tree line to cut down the bandits. Both elves stood on stirrups, with their knees driving the Antelope to slam into the unaware bandits. Ren took point while Aurelia cut down those who dodged and were too far for Ren to run over. Antelope and Rider each attacked, a body blow or headbutt and a falchion swing. Ren was the first to burst from the tree line, with Aurelia circling back to subdue those who still tried to stand. In the late afternoon shadows, bow shots came for Ren. He could see them and only dodged the one close enough to hit, despite being a fast-moving target with a sprinting Antelope beneath him. The surprising sound of 3 rapidly successive bow shots made Ren jump off his Antelope and land running and tumbling. One of the 3 shots killed his Antelope, and he shouted to Aurelia to take cover. Ren understood someone was using strength enhancement magic with a powerful, heavy bow. The technique fired arrows very quickly like a burst-fire weapon, making the first arrow hide the other 2 arrows that followed. The ability to fire 3 arrows in less than a second was similar to his own blood magic, which made time slow down and pushed muscles and bones to the limits of speed and power. Like his magic, there were limits, and running to the tree line prevented another opportunity for such a shot. Ren's blood magic was not as effective outside of revenge and fury. He couldn't enhance his abilities until he was more desperate, and right now he needed a cool head. He used his elven perceptions to better see his path in the forest and proceeded to sprint towards where he last saw the threat. This was when the bandits broke cover and ran into the Teamsters. Some were easily shot down, but a bandit with a glossy black bow and dark, earthy clothes tied snugly around his body was much faster. This dark archer used his comrades as cover to cut down a Traveller's Guild bowman and teamster. Now there was open ground between Ren and the dark archer, and Ren sprinted across to close the distance. The dark archer jumped down, firing while taking cover behind the cart. Ren managed to dodge that shot, spinning uncontrollably from the sudden shift of trajectory, but caught himself, hearing the loud sound and shudder of arrows hitting the cart. He realized it was Aurelia firing at the dark archer from behind. He heard her shout out, "He's wounded!" probably hitting him from behind. The dark archer put the cart behind him and between himself and Aurelia. Then the dark archer tried to make his special triple shot at Ren, which was timely as Ren was planning to hurl his knives, falchion and hand axe while sprinting at the archer. The archer managed to dodge the knife, only to lose his aim, parrying the falchion and getting a square hit at his lower torso from the axe. 3 arrows burst in the general direction of Ren, who managed to dodge the first arrow meant to hide the other 2 and block the second one by twisting into a scissor slide. The third pierced Ren's side torso since he slid into the dark archer's legs to knock his feet out from under him. The dark archer caught himself and used his enhanced strength to pummel Ren to prevent his fall. Ren tried to catch the fist and raise his feet into a scissor lock, but could not stop a glancing body punch from knocking the wind out of him and weakening his grapple. The dark archer had to stop to wrench Ren away, only for 2 arrows to nail through his calves, bursting beside his shin. Losing his balance, the dark archer fell and Ren tried to prevent killing him to gather information by catching his fall. The Dark Archer, still alive, eyes wide and searching, met Ren's eyes, who said, "Sorry about this," as Ren dislocated his arm. Irelia panted, having caught up, and began to staunch the blood from Ren's leg wound and remove the arrow. She accidentally said, "Forgive me, love," while pulling the arrow, and was about to kiss him, but instead patted his cheek. Ren was happy for the unusual affection, but more so, he noticed the Dark Archer used bodkin points to increase the number of arrows he could pack in his quiver, instead of broad or leaf-head arrows. Meanwhile, in the outskirts of the city, Theria was a green shaper, like her husband Thiel, prior to her enslavement. Her tasks around their commune involved maintaining the lands and biology of the Western Elven territories and their human allies. She was used to dealing with plagues affecting animals and plants. In this situation, she had to draw from her most basic training to create weapons and tools, particularly harnessing the natural depressants her body could produce while training the 3 other women in body shaping. Humans with blood magic have a poor understanding of the arcana. They believe that the adrenaline boost they employ is a high art of blood magic. It seems that the matriarchs and priestesses have their own motives for not correcting this misunderstanding. Humans don't understand that body shaping is slower but more effective for consistently increased performance over time. This performance sacrifices longevity so that the person can survive in the near term. That adrenaline boost, or what humans call body enhancement, can only be amplified from a base. The key is bone and tendon strength, as elfin body-shaping magic draws and engages all the muscles. Dashiell had elfin potency and natural talent, while Sane and Thine were young and shapeable. Their ability to survive the mental trauma of enslavement was evidence of their adaptability. Over the weeks they spent together, Theria had been reshaping their digestive systems and their internal biomes. Ren and Irelia's biomes were already fully adapted to be more efficient, making those of their profession shorter-lived but more capable. Theria worried that her arts were designed to take time they didn't have. Accelerated use of her abilities could lead to cancerous growths and cysts if she did not give the bodies of the other women time to adapt. Still, they performed exceptionally stronger and faster than men who qualified for martial duties. For their training, Irelia was able to negotiate a deal with Doge Alvert to grant Theria and the others membership into the agents. They would travel to all the way stations within a 100 kilometers radius, a total journey of 2,000 kilometers in the mapped territory, and apply the corrections and improvements. Accompanying them were 2 men, an older man in his 30s named Euron and a younger man in his 20s named Rin. They packed travel gear, several replacement shoes, 5 loads of wooden slat documents each, and weapons, and they began their training. Euron and Rin underestimated their companions until the speed of their march was revealed. The pace the women kept was about 4 kilometers on foot and 6 kilometers an hour on antelope. They had covered 3 way stations by the end of the day, along with a detailed accounting of supplies and inspections. The women would rest while reading the documents, perform intensive strength exercises as they waited for Euron and Rin to catch up, and rush ahead to scout the area. They rotated, with Dashiell and Theria alternating, partnering with Sane and Thine. Talk happened only when eating, and with only a pair of them at a time, as another pair ranged farther out and left marks for the other 2. On their travels they encountered slaves, particularly debt slaves, and some who were spoils of war from the south. They also encountered Asterai patrols, a squad of war riders equipped with horsebows and spears, a foreign-born force the city employs. Their inspection was interrupted by an emergency at a waystation farm. A creature had attacked the farm, which paid its taxes and tribute by maintaining the supplies of the waystation. When they arrived, they saw individuals arming themselves with spears and various shields to look for the creature. Doge Alvert's men reacted swiftly. There was not much discussion. The custodian, a man named Enri, told the waystation's women to lock up. 5 men mounted on antelopes and rode in the direction of the threat. The group joined them, making for a total of 11, with the injured boy who reported the attack riding with Enri. They rode as fast as the antelopes could carry them, averaging 12 kilometers per hour. They left the station when the sun broke the horizon, and reached the cluster of homes working the fields about 25 kilometers away an hour before noon. A younger and older man named Bartu and Rhett took the antelopes to water, while the rest proceeded on foot with spears and shields. When they could see the dry stone-round huts with thatched roofs against the hillsides, they noticed no cooking fires maintained. They approached from a northern route moving southerly. Rin and Euron were serious, the junior exhausting his energy with eyes darting everywhere. Euron, with his experience, was able to make a mental map of the sounds and what they meant to proceed. They had their own gestures and kept within line of sight of each other. Thyria had hunted game and scrounged with the 3 junior huntresses. They kept a closer group, only 3 or 4 bounds away, to come to each other's aid. They moved quickly to the flanking edge of Enri's net, particularly moving in the deeper, rockier area where water would stream when it rained, and it was still muddy. Dashiel had a long spear at the ready, while Tain and Sane had their bows nocked, and Thyria mimicked insect sounds to direct them. Thyria drew an arrow that had a pungent smell when its head broke. Enri pulled out rations and gestured a rotation for the front ranks to move back to drink and consume their smoky barley cakes, while the rear ranks covered their position. He calmed the boy down, explaining that it was rare for vorbears to come so far north into human lands. Enri wanted to second-guess the boy, but it was Hark's son, Tyr. Hark had been in the prince's hunting parties and knew what vor beasts looked like and their ways. Such creatures getting past Prince Khan's army and scouts was not a good sign for the prince's campaign. Hark, being the headman of these fields and farms, knew the best odds were to call for help. 50 workers against a vor beast. Such a beast had the destructive power of 10 to 100 veteran warriors, depending on how powerful it was. They had to confirm it really was a vor bear. A child's word would not suffice. It was only a moment's thought when Enri looked for his men and the smell of blood and the overpowering musk of a vor beast assaulted him. He took his broad-edged heavy spear in readiness, only to push Tyr to parry with a terrible swing. Tyr screamed and ran. Enri retreated with a powerful swing aimed to cut at the creature's head, which focused on fleeing prey. Euron drew his heavy bow and fired an arrow big enough to be a javelin in the time it took to take a deep breath. Rin swallowed hard and charged with his spear. Enri, the custodian, was the prime witness, his rings and marks signifying war and the threat of raiders. To summon a warband, they had to ensure Enri escaped as a witness. Euron's arrow thudded into the thick hide of the vor beast, turning its attention towards him. Rin saw the huge creature the size of a house, resembling a bear except for the raptor-like claws and body. Its peripheral vision was poor, and when its head turned, Enri ran and Rin shadowed it as it tried to look for Euron. The vorbear sniffed the air and quickly found Rin behind it. It was about to lunge at him when loud whistles rang out and an arrow struck its head, releasing a pungent smell. The vorbear was going to focus on Rin, but blood welled up around its eyes and ears. Unable to judge distance and direction, Rin evaded and performed the same retreating cutting blow with his spear. They knew the creature was too tough, and losing a weapon to its hide would be disastrous. Euron kept shooting his large, heavy arrows at the creature. From a perpendicular direction, arrows aiming at the vorbear's face caused it to pause and choose between the stinging arrows or the powerful ones. Rin took cover, whistling to get Euron's attention to flee. Rin saw 3 of his comrades ambushed by the vorbear, their bodies mostly consumed. The parts left behind frightened Rin, tearing at his loyalties and oaths. Euron could not directly see if Rin and Enri had escaped, but he knew the creature was sufficiently distracted. He could hear its powerful feet crushing the forest floor towards him. He did not see another arrow giving the creature pause and reason to change direction. He thought it better to circle back to the antelopes. He moved too slowly and the creature saw him. It reared up and began its bounding leaps towards him, unaware of the cuts at its armpits and the back of its knees. These cuts, mere scrapes on a human, bled and tore worse as the creature moved. Euron didn't turn back to see the creature smash into a large tree, distracted by spear blade strikes that cut at the most flexible and thinnest skins on its body. When it body slammed a heavy oak big enough to support a house, it felt a sharp pain as a spear snapped and a blade embedded itself deep in the back of its knee. Shane and Thine were on their antelopes and their spares, leading Dashiel's, Theria's, Euron's and Rin's antelopes to pick them up. Ahead of them, Enri and Tyr were riding down the northern pass, stopping to see any movement half a kilometre away. Dashiel met up with Theria, who threw a wet rag on the face of the vorbear before running with heightened speed to jump on their antelopes and urging them to ride with the greatest urgency. When they caught up, Dashiel stood on her stirrups and shouted, "Run!" Enri, half a kilometre away, could guess from the body language more than hear it, and whipped his mount to run. Rin looked at the women and wondered before hearing a loud crash and seeing the vorbear break through the tree line to charge towards them. The two younger women glanced at each other and remembered the story Theria had told about such creatures and how the elves handled them. No human or elf could harm such a creature directly, but the elves destroyed them by making the creatures ruin themselves with madness and pain. They recalled Dashiel asking if Theria had ever hunted one, and Theria had been part of a party that drove the creature mad. Their steeds, great running birds, would lead these creatures to the spiked wall of trees that protected elven lands. There, their warriors would slip between the thorns to cut at the creature until it could be blinded. Then, a worm wielder would destroy it from the inside. Sane pointed out that they did not have such resources here. Theria, like a teacher, asked, "Then what can we do?" "Distract it, draw it away from the villages and towards us," Sane suggested. Theria responded, "It could outrun the antelopes." "We need to wound it enough to slow it down," Dashiel said. Theria agreed but added, "It can heal very quickly. It took a worm wielder to finally kill it because they needed it not to recover and overwhelm it with wounds and pain." "We have nothing like that here," Dashiel noted. Theria said, "Correct," and then gestured, pausing for a moment. Thine interjected, "You mean we have to lead it somewhere else?" Theria confirmed, "Yes, not here," her eyes leading in the direction of the city. "But," Sane said, "that's a day away. We will be running and galloping for a day." Theria looked at her with agreement, "But not the whole day. Smoke signals would alert the city as we pass the way station. The fires and smoke will have an army marching towards us by the evening." Theria was mostly right. The vorbear became berserk with anger, and she had to pull Euron's and Enri's reins into the woods to prevent it from catching up, forcing it into terrain where the antelopes excelled, but the vorbear stumbled. By late night, an hour after sunset, they arrived in sight of the army while the vorbear was half a kilometre away. Enri blew the messenger's horn, and another messenger's horn answered. War drums and war horns signalled the ranks to form, and pikes bristled as archers with burning arrows lit up the night sky, illuminating the path behind them. Enri and the others switched mounts and were joined by the army's messengers for more reinforcements. Euron, Rin, and the women remained. Euron, taking a drink, joined the archers, looking for the Travellers' Guild banners. Thyria joined them with the other archers. There were spare self-strong bows, heavy 50-load draw bows as thick as a spear. The men around them were surprised when they joined ranks, and by the time they lit their burning arrows, they could see the vorbear running faster than an antelope on a straight path. Theria called out, "Light its path!" and the women began to fire as the creature came close, making it more visible and terrifying as it bounded closer. Decarchs shouted at the archers to loose their arrows. Pikemen and heavy shields wavered at the huge creature, realizing how dangerous it was too late as it was lit up by fire arrows. The creature slammed against the shields and pikes, breaking them and crushing the men who held them. The archers panicked, but before the army could rout, a figure ran to cleave a bicep of the vorbear and spin his glaive to cut at its blood-encrusted knee. The vorbear roared and swung a raptor-like claw to catch and crush the warrior, only to be deftly dodged as the warrior stepped back and swung low against its legs. The pikeman saw Prince Eager in his lighter mail skirmishing war dress. Each step put him meters away or closer to the vorbear, his glaive shallowly cut, predicting the shifting body weight of the creature. The pikeman wisely encircled and charged to pierce the vorbear away from the space the prince occupied. The Vorbear didn't waver until a figure rushed behind the creature and drove a heavy spear with her entire weight into its back. Prince Igar witnessed this and began to cut deeper at the creature's claws. It shook off Dashiell, but she was able to land and tumble, only to get another spear from Thyria, who joined her. Thine and Sane approached, firing at the creature's face. They could see clearer than everyone else as they had blood magic to enhance their night vision. Their arrows failed to pierce the creature, but it reflexively closed its eyes and shook off the arrows. Dashiell charged to stab its blood-crusted armpits and called for another spear. The Traveller's Guild passed spears to Thyria and Dashiell. The others watched as the prince and the women whittled the creature down. Chunks of flesh and bone were exposed and bleeding out. Its movements slowed down until Dashiell caused the creature to break its leg from its own weight, losing the use of one of its arms for balance. Prince Igar cleaved the joint to weaken it and its claws. Thyria charged with a spear aimed at the creature's ear. Thine and Sane shifted to spears now that it could not protect its eyes. The women stabbed its face, their spears unable to pierce the carapace but sliding into its armoured lids. Another spear strike wedged itself, and the prince took the pause to jump and thrust his entire weight into the other eye of the creature. Amazingly, the creature did not die easily. It still struggled when ropes and chains began to bind it, and the warriors continued to stab it until it finally failed to stir. The prince wanted to look for the more capable allies, but they were gone, busy with the capture and destruction of the beast. After the battle, Prince Igar found himself intrigued by the unusual fighting skills and coordination of the women. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to them than met the eye. He decided to follow them discreetly as they made their way to the guest home of Steward Camber. A day later, Steward Camber found himself negotiating for their contract extension and exclusivity. Thyria told Illyria how the juniors fared and how formidable Dashiell had become. Ren was fascinated to find out more about these vorbeasts, learning from Thyria that humans bred these creatures for war and the problems and strengths of their use. Sane and Thine reflected on the day-long endurance ride to survive and the fear and panic they endured. They did this in the wonderful guest home of Steward Camber, with food, drinks, and medicines prepared by Thyria. However, their respite was short-lived. Prince Igar, having pieced together their elven heritage and recognizing the significance of their abilities, decided to confront them. As they prepared to leave the guest home, they found themselves surrounded by Prince Igar and his guards. "So, this is the fruit of Father's silver to the east, elven spies," Prince Igar said, his voice filled with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. Thyria, Ren, and the others stood their ground, realizing they were now caught in a dangerous web of politics and power. The tension was palpable as they awaited the prince's next move, knowing that their fate now hinged on their ability to navigate this unexpected confrontation.